Most men ruin attraction the moment they open their mouth. They see a woman they want to impress, and they do what they have been taught to do. They compliment her looks. They tell her she is beautiful. They mention her smile, her eyes, her dress, her hair. And then they wonder why she smiles politely, says thank you, and forgets them 5 minutes later. Here is the truth, folks. A woman does not fantasize about the compliment every other man gives her. She remembers the one that feels personal, the one that touches her mind, her energy, or the emotional effect she has on you. That is the difference between sounding nice and becoming unforgettable. Most men never learn this. They keep praising the surface while ignoring the deeper parts of her identity that actually create emotional tension. And because of that, they leave no imprint at all. In this video, I am going to show you the compliments that land differently. Not cheap lines, not flattery. Real words that can make a woman stop, feel seen, and replay the moment long after the conversation ends. You will learn why most compliments fail, what women secretly respond to, and how tone, timing, and presence turn a simple sentence into something she feels in her body. Pay close attention, my friend, because the second and third compliment go much deeper than appearance, and once you understand why they work, you will never speak to women the same way again. Let's get into it. Number 1. Most men compliment her wrong. Let's start with a hard truth, folks. Most men believe they know how to compliment a woman. In reality, they are doing it in the exact way that makes them forgettable. Let's be honest for a moment, my friend. When a man meets a woman he finds attractive, his first instinct is usually the same. He says something about her appearance. You're beautiful. You have amazing eyes. I love your smile. Now, here is the problem. Those compliments are not bad, but they are extremely common. A woman who is even moderately attractive has heard those exact sentences hundreds of times in her life, sometimes thousands. By the time a man says them, they barely register emotionally. They sound polite. They sound nice. But they do not create impact. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." In everyday interaction, words also leave echoes. Some words disappear immediately. Others stay in a person's mind long after the conversation ends. Generic compliments disappear quickly. Compliments that touch something deeper stay. Let me give you a simple example. James is 62 and attending a small wine tasting event in Napa Valley. During the evening, he begins talking with a woman named Lauren, 56. The conversation starts casually, like most social conversations do. After a few minutes, James smiles and says something he believes is charming. "You look really beautiful tonight." Lauren smiles politely and says, "Thank you." Then the conversation moves on. Nothing awkward happened, nothing offensive happened, but nothing memorable happened either. The compliment landed the same way. Dozens of other compliments probably landed for her that week. Now imagine a slightly different moment later that evening. A man named Robert, 64, is speaking with Lauren about her work in architecture. As she describes how she approaches designing buildings, Robert listens quietly for a moment and then says something different. "I like the way your mind works. The way you explain things makes people see the world differently." Lauren pauses. For a brief second, the conversation slows down. Because that compliment is different. It does not focus on the obvious. It focuses on something more personal. Something connected to how she thinks rather than how she looks. Suddenly the compliment feels specific, and specific compliments create emotional impact. Seneca once wrote that wisdom comes from observing what others ignore. Most men compliment what they can see on the surface. The rare man notices something deeper, and that difference matters. When a compliment touches identity rather than appearance, it creates curiosity. A woman begins wondering what exactly you noticed. What moment made you say that? What part of her stood out to you? That curiosity creates a mental loop. Instead of hearing a sentence and forgetting it, she replays the moment in her mind. And that is where attraction often begins. If this insight resonates with you, type this in the comments, "I see deeper." Stick with me because the next shift is even more important. Once you understand why appearance compliments fall flat, you can start using words that actually create emotional tension. And what comes next might completely change how you speak to women. Number 2. Stop praising her looks. Now, here is the shift most men struggle to accept, folks. If you want to become memorable to a woman, you must stop relying on compliments about her looks. Not because beauty does not matter, but because beauty is the most obvious thing in the room. Let's be real for a moment, my friend. When a woman walks into a social space and she is attractive, she already knows what the first wave of compliments will sound like. Beautiful, pretty, amazing smile, nice dress. Those comments arrive almost automatically. They are predictable. And because they are predictable, they carry very little emotional weight. That is why praising her appearance rarely creates the reaction men expect. It may earn a polite smile. It may earn a quick thank you, but it almost never creates fascination. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others unless it relates to some mutual benefit." In simple terms, he believed a person should focus on what truly matters rather than what is superficial. When a man only compliments a woman's appearance, he is reacting to the most surface-level detail available. He is seeing what everyone else already sees. And women notice that instantly. The deeper parts of her identity often receive far less attention. Her perspective, her creativity, her emotional intelligence, her way of observing the world. Those are the parts she actually invests her life developing. And when someone recognizes those parts, instead of simply praising her appearance, something very different happens inside her mind. The compliment feels rare. Epictetus taught that people value what is difficult to obtain. In the same way, emotional recognition is far more powerful than visual praise because it shows you are paying attention beyond the obvious. When a man notices how a woman thinks, how she explains ideas, or how she carries herself emotionally, he reveals something important. He is not just reacting, he is observing. And observation creates intrigue. Instead of hearing a familiar compliment, she hears something that feels personal, something that suggests you actually listen to her rather than just looking at her. That difference can completely shift the emotional tone of an interaction. Think about the psychological effect for a moment. When a woman hears yet another comment about her beauty, her mind quickly categorizes the speaker. He becomes one more voice in a long list of men who noticed the same surface detail. But when a man notices something about the way she processes the world, it interrupts that pattern. Her mind slows down. She begins wondering what exactly you noticed. What part of her behavior caught your attention? What conversation made you say that? Seneca often wrote that the wise person learns to look beneath appearances. In social interaction, this means paying attention to qualities that most people overlook. That is where real connection begins. Compliments that focus on appearance fade quickly because they require no real awareness. Compliments that recognize something deeper create emotional significance. And emotional significance is what women remember. If this insight resonates with you, type this in the comments: "I noticed deeper." Stay tuned, because the next compliment takes this idea even further. It does not just acknowledge how she thinks, it touches something even more powerful, the emotional energy she leaves behind after a conversation. Number 3, the compliment that enters her mind. Now let's move into something far more powerful than a surface compliment, folks. This is the kind of compliment that does not just land in the moment, it enters her mind. Let's be real for a moment, my friend. Most compliments disappear almost instantly. A woman hears them, smiles politely, and then moves on with her day. The words leave no emotional imprint. But occasionally a compliment does something different. It lingers. It becomes something she thinks about later, on the drive home, while making dinner, even the next morning. Why does that happen? Because the compliment touches something personal about how she thinks. Let me show you what this looks like in a real situation. Daniel is 64, attending a small business networking event in San Diego. During the evening, he begins talking with a woman named Melissa, 57, who works as a creative director for a design company. Their conversation moves beyond the usual small talk. Melissa begins explaining how she approaches storytelling in advertising. She describes how people respond emotionally to images and how small details change the way a message feels. Daniel listens carefully. After she finishes explaining, he pauses for a moment and then says something simple. "I like the way your mind works. You notice details most people completely miss." Melissa stops speaking for a second. The compliment is not about her appearance. It is not generic. It reflects something specific about the way she thinks, and that makes it different. Later that night, Melissa might replay that moment in her mind, not because the words were dramatic, but because they revealed that someone actually paid attention. Now consider another example. Stephen is 62, attending a lecture at a small cultural center in Boston. After the talk ends, he starts a conversation with a woman named Angela, 55. They begin discussing the topic of the lecture and how it relates to society today. Angela shares an opinion about how people often misunderstand historical events because they focus only on headlines rather than deeper context. Stephen listens and then says calmly, "You have a sharp way of connecting ideas. It's interesting to hear how your mind puts things together." Again, the reaction is subtle but meaningful. Angela smiles, but there is also curiosity in her expression, because that compliment feels personal. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." In many ways, people take great pride in the way their mind works, but very few compliments recognize that. Most men focus only on what they can see. The rare man notices how a woman thinks, and when a compliment touches that part of her identity, it creates a mental echo. She begins wondering what exactly you noticed, which moment stood out to you, why you chose those specific words. That curiosity keeps the interaction alive even after the conversation ends. Seneca often wrote about the value of attention. To truly see another person requires more than reacting to what is obvious. It requires observing the patterns beneath the surface. And when someone feels truly seen in that way, the moment becomes memorable. A compliment about beauty may feel pleasant, but a compliment about the way her mind works feels meaningful. One disappears quickly, the other stays. If this insight resonates with you, type this in the comments. I see her mind. Stay with me because the next compliment moves even deeper. It touches something many women secretly wonder about: the emotional energy they leave behind after meeting someone. And that realization can become surprisingly powerful. Number 4, praise the way she thinks. Now we begin moving into the first compliment that truly leaves a mark, folks. Not a compliment about how she looks, not a compliment about what she is wearing, a compliment about how she thinks. Let's be honest for a moment, my friend. Most people go through life with their thinking almost completely unnoticed. In social situations, people react to what they see on the surface: appearance, clothes, voice, posture. But the way someone's mind works is rarely acknowledged. And that is exactly why this kind of compliment hits differently. When you say something like, "I really like the way your mind works," you are not reacting to something obvious. You are recognizing a part of her identity that she has spent years developing. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." The Stoics believed that the mind is the core of who we are. The way a person thinks shapes their decisions, their creativity, and the way they understand the world. When you compliment the way a woman thinks, you are speaking directly to that core. That is why the emotional reaction can be stronger than most men expect. Instead of hearing something she has heard 1,000 times, she hears something personal, something specific, something that suggests you were actually listening. Epictetus often reminded his students that attention is one of the most powerful forms of respect. When a person feels that their thoughts have been genuinely heard, It creates a sense of recognition that goes deeper than simple flattery. And recognition creates connection. A compliment about appearance can be appreciated, but it rarely creates curiosity. A compliment about the mind does, because the moment you say it, her mind begins to wonder what exactly you noticed. Which part of the conversation stood out? What idea caught your attention? Why did you choose those words? That curiosity creates something powerful, a mental replay. She begins remembering the conversation again, trying to see it from your perspective. That reflection keeps the interaction alive in her mind long after the conversation is over. Seneca once wrote that wisdom often comes from learning to observe what others overlook. In everyday social interactions, most people notice only what is easy to see, but a man who recognizes how someone thinks is showing a deeper level of awareness, and awareness is rare. That rarity makes the compliment meaningful. It tells her you are not simply reacting to appearance, you are responding to who she actually is. Now, before we move forward, folks, if you enjoy exploring these deeper ideas about Stoic mindset, emotional intelligence, and understanding human behavior, consider joining the membership of this channel. Inside the membership, we go further into the psychology behind attraction, communication, and masculine presence, so you can apply these principles in real conversations and real relationships. Because the goal here is not to memorize lines. The goal is to develop the kind of awareness that makes your words carry weight. If this insight resonates with you, type this in the comments: I value her mind. Stay with me, because the next compliment moves into something even more intriguing. It does not focus on what she says or how she thinks. It focuses on something far more mysterious: her energy. And once you understand why that matters, you will start noticing a completely different side of attraction. Number 5. The energy compliment she feels. Now we step into a different layer of attraction, folks. Not the way she looks, not even the way she thinks. Her energy. Let's be real for a moment, my friend. Most men compliment what they can easily describe: beauty, eyes, smile, style. But energy is different. Energy is something you feel before you fully understand it. And that is exactly why this compliment can be so powerful. When a man says something like, "There's something about your energy that stays with me," he is speaking to something much deeper than appearance. He is acknowledging the emotional impression she leaves behind. And that impression matters more than most men realize. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Patrick is 63. Attending a small evening jazz event in Chicago. During the intermission, he begins talking with a woman named Carla, 56. They speak about music, travel, and the atmosphere of the city at night. The conversation is relaxed, and after a few minutes, Carla laughs about how certain songs remind her of specific moments in life. Patrick pauses for a moment, and then says something simple. "You know, there's something about your energy. It lingers, even when you're just talking about everyday things." Carla smiles, but it is not the quick, polite smile people give when they hear a typical compliment. She pauses slightly, because the comment feels different. Patrick did not say she was beautiful. He did not comment on her dress or her appearance. Instead, he described the emotional effect she leaves behind. Later that night, Carla may replay that moment. "What exactly did he notice about my energy? Was it my laugh? The way I tell stories, the way I look at people when I speak?" That curiosity creates something powerful. Now consider another situation. Thomas is 61, attending a weekend photography workshop in Santa Fe. During a break, he begins talking with a woman named Elena, 54, about why certain photographs feel more emotional than others. Elena explains that sometimes a photo captures a quiet feeling rather than a dramatic moment. Thomas listens carefully and then responds, "It's interesting. When you talk about things like that, the whole room feels calmer somehow. Your energy has a grounding effect." Again, the reaction is subtle but meaningful. Elena smiles and tilts her head slightly as if considering the comment. Because energy compliments touch something mysterious about identity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. In human relationships, perception plays a powerful role. When you describe the emotional effect someone has on you, you reveal your perception of their presence. And presence is something people rarely hear about themselves. Seneca often reminded his students that human beings are deeply influenced by the emotional atmosphere around them. Some people bring tension into a room, others bring calm, others bring excitement. When you acknowledge a woman's energy, you are recognizing the invisible influence she has on the moment. That recognition can be surprisingly intimate, because it tells her that you are not just looking at her, you are feeling the experience of being around her. And that feeling often becomes memorable. If this insight resonates with you, type this in the comments. I feel her energy. Stick with me because the next compliment goes even further. It reveals something women secretly wonder about after every meaningful conversation, whether their presence stayed in your mind after the moment ended. Number 6. The line that stays in her head. Now let's talk about something subtle, folks. Something most men completely overlook. Not every compliment works in the moment. Some compliments work later, hours later, sometimes even days later. And those are the compliments that stay in her head. Let's be honest, my friend. Attraction is rarely created by the loudest statement in the room. More often it is created by a quiet sentence that echoes in someone's thoughts long after the conversation ends. This is where many men misunderstand how psychology works. They believe a compliment should immediately impress a woman. But the most powerful compliments often do something else. They plant a thought she keeps returning to. The Stoics understood something important about the human mind. Epictetus once said that people are disturbed not by events, but by the meaning they attach to them. In other words, the mind keeps turning over ideas that feel unfinished. And the right compliment creates that unfinished curiosity. Imagine hearing a man say something simple like this. There's something about the way you express yourself that people probably remember longer than you realize. Notice what just happened. He did not fully explain what he meant. He did not break it down. He simply left a thoughtful observation hanging in the air. And the moment the conversation moves on, the mind begins doing its own work. What exactly did he notice? What part of the conversation stood out? Was it my tone, my confidence, my perspective? The mind begins replaying the interaction. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about how the mind constantly returns to impressions that carry emotional weight. When a person feels genuinely seen, the memory of that moment can return again and again. This is why certain words stay with us. They trigger reflection. Seneca explained something similar when he said that powerful ideas do not shout. They linger quietly in the mind until their meaning becomes clear. The same principle applies to communication. A line that stays in someone's head usually has 3 qualities. First, it feels personal. Second, it is calm rather than dramatic. Third, it leaves space for interpretation. Most men make the mistake of explaining too much. They try to convince, they try to impress, they try to deliver a perfect statement. But the mind is far more fascinated by something it needs to interpret. When a woman hears a thoughtful observation about herself that is slightly mysterious, the brain naturally wants to resolve the meaning. And that resolution happens later, during the drive home, during a quiet moment, sometimes when she unexpectedly remembers the conversation. This is why presence matters so much in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed that calm, deliberate speech carries more influence than emotional persuasion. A man who speaks with quiet certainty does not rush to explain himself. He allows his words to stand, and those words gain weight because of that restraint. So, instead of trying to deliver the perfect compliment, think about something deeper. What genuine observation about her would make her pause and think, because the right sentence does not just impress someone, it stays with them. If this insight resonates with you, type this in the comments. I choose my words. Stay tuned because the next idea might surprise you. It reveals why the calmest compliment a man can give often creates the strongest attraction, and most men never realize it. Number 7. The calm compliment women crave. Here is something many men misunderstand, folks. They believe attraction is created through excitement, big energy, or dramatic words. But let's be honest for a moment, my friend. A woman who has lived a little, who has experienced relationships, attention, and conversation from many different men, often becomes tired of exaggerated compliments. The loud ones, the overly eager ones, the ones that sound rehearsed. What many women actually crave is something calmer. A compliment that feels grounded. A compliment delivered without pressure, because calmness signals something powerful about a man. It suggests emotional control. It suggests confidence. And confidence without noise has a very different impact. Let me give you an example. Daniel is 62, attending a small wine tasting event in Napa Valley. He finds himself sitting next to a woman named Laura, 57. They begin talking about travel, food, and the strange way certain places seem to stay in your memory long after you leave. Laura shares a story about visiting a quiet coastal town years ago and how the silence there felt almost peaceful. Daniel listens carefully. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't rush to respond. When she finishes, he simply says something calm. "I like the way you describe things. You notice details most people miss." That's it. No exaggeration. No attempt to impress. Just a steady observation delivered in a relaxed tone. Laura pauses for a moment before smiling. Because that compliment feels different. Daniel didn't rush to praise her appearance. He didn't try to flatter her in an obvious way. Instead, he recognized something about her awareness, and the calm delivery makes it feel genuine. Now imagine another moment. Greg is 64, attending a charity dinner in Boston. During the evening, he begins speaking with a woman named Susan, 55, about books they enjoyed when they were younger. Susan mentions that she often rereads certain novels because they reveal new meaning over time. Greg nods slightly and says something simple. "That says a lot about you." Most people stop looking deeper after the first answer. Susan laughs quietly, but the compliment lands, because once again it is calm, it is thoughtful, and it reflects something about who she is, rather than what she looks like. Let's be real here. Calm compliments stand out because they feel rare. Most conversations move quickly. Most compliments are thrown out casually. But a calm observation suggests presence. It shows that the man speaking is not chasing approval. He is simply sharing what he noticed. That difference matters more than most men realize. When a compliment is delivered calmly, it signals that the man is comfortable with silence, comfortable with himself, comfortable with the moment. And that kind of composure is attractive, because emotional steadiness creates safety, and safety allows curiosity to grow. Instead of feeling like she must react immediately, a woman can simply absorb the moment. She can sit with the compliment and feel the sincerity behind it. That feeling is far more powerful than loud praise. If this idea resonates with you, my friend, type this in the comments. I value calm presence. Stay with me because the next part reveals something equally important. It is not only what you say that creates attraction, it is how you say it. And once you understand the quiet confidence behind those words, everything about your communication begins to change. Number 8. Say it with quiet confidence. Now here is where many men lose the power of a good compliment, folks. Not because their words are wrong, but because their delivery is weak. Let's be straight about this, my friend. The same sentence can create attraction or kill it completely, depending on how it is said. Words matter, yes, but tone, timing, and composure matter even more. A compliment spoken with nervous energy feels like approval seeking. A compliment spoken with quiet confidence feels like a simple observation from a man who knows his own value. And women can feel that difference immediately. The Stoics talked about this kind of inner composure long before modern psychology ever studied it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man should carry himself with calm dignity, not needing to prove anything to anyone around him. That idea applies perfectly here. When you speak calmly, without rushing, without trying to impress, your words carry weight because they come from stability rather than need. Most men rush their compliments. They speak quickly. Their tone rises slightly. Their body language asks for a reaction, and that subtle neediness weakens the moment. But when a man speaks with quiet confidence, the compliment feels grounded. Consider the difference between these two deliveries. In the first situation, a man says something like this in a fast, slightly eager tone. "You're really interesting. I like the way you think." The words themselves are fine, but the energy behind them feels uncertain. Now imagine the same sentence spoken calmly after a pause. "I like the way you think." No rush, no explanation, just a quiet statement delivered with relaxed certainty. That pause changes everything. Epictetus taught that a disciplined mind does not react impulsively. It chooses its actions deliberately. When a man takes a moment before speaking, he shows that his words are chosen rather than thrown out carelessly. That restraint signals maturity. Seneca also believed that true influence often comes from composure rather than persuasion. People trust calm voices more than anxious ones. The same principle appears in attraction. When a compliment is spoken slowly and with ease, it does not feel like a performance. It feels real, and authenticity always carries more weight than clever lines. This is why tone matters just as much as the words themselves. Quiet confidence communicates three things without needing to say them directly. First, it shows you are comfortable in your own presence. Second, it shows you are not trying to impress or chase approval. Third, it shows that what you said was a genuine observation. And that combination creates intrigue, because when a man speaks calmly and then moves on without seeking validation, the compliment lingers in the air. The moment does not feel forced. It feels natural. The Stoics often practiced speaking with intention. They believed words should be used carefully, like tools rather than noise. A man who learns to speak this way becomes far more persuasive without raising his voice or exaggerating his message. And that is exactly what quiet confidence does. It allows a simple compliment to carry emotional weight. If this idea resonates with you, type this in the comments: "I speak with calm confidence." Don't go anywhere, because the next part reveals something fascinating. It explains how the right compliment can quietly trigger imagination. And when that happens, attraction begins to grow long after the conversation is over. Number 9. Words that create fantasy. Now we reach a very interesting layer of psychology, folks. Because attraction does not grow only from what happens in front of you. It also grows from what happens inside someone's imagination. Let's be honest about something, my friend. Many men believe attraction comes from bold statements or obvious flirting. But the mind rarely becomes fascinated by something that is too direct. The mind becomes fascinated by suggestion, by possibility, by words that open a small door and allow imagination to walk through it. That is what creates fantasy. When you say something that gently hints at how someone makes you feel without spelling everything out, the brain naturally begins filling in the rest. And that process can be surprisingly powerful. Let me show you how this works in real life. Michael is 61, attending a weekend art exhibit in San Diego. During the evening, he finds himself talking with a woman named Karen, 55, about the paintings on display. Karen explains that certain paintings remind her of quiet moments she experienced years ago while traveling through Europe. Michael listens carefully. He studies the painting they are standing in front of, then glances back at her and says something unexpected. "You know what's interesting? The way you talk about places makes them feel more vivid than the paintings." Karen pauses, because that sentence does something subtle. Michael did not compliment her appearance. He did not try to flirt in an obvious way. Instead, he suggested that her presence adds emotional color to the world around her. That kind of statement plants an idea. It makes her wonder how he experiences conversations with her, and that curiosity quietly activates imagination. Now consider another situation. Anthony is 64, sitting at a quiet cafe in Seattle when he begins speaking with a woman named Melissa, 53. They talk about music, books, and the strange way certain songs seem to hold memories inside them. Melissa describes how one particular song reminds her of a summer road trip many years ago. Anthony smiles slightly and says something thoughtful. "You seem like the kind of person who leaves strong impressions on people without even realizing it." Again, notice what just happened. Anthony did not fully explain the meaning of the compliment. He left space, and that space invites interpretation. Melissa might later wonder what kind of impression she left on him. What exactly did he notice? Why did he say it that way? Those unanswered questions create mental replay, and mental replay is where imagination begins working. Let's face the truth here. The human mind loves unfinished stories. When something is suggested rather than fully explained, the brain automatically starts exploring the possibilities. That is the quiet psychology behind fantasy. You are not forcing attraction. You are allowing the mind to wander toward it. And when that happens naturally, the emotional effect becomes stronger because it feels self-discovered rather than imposed. Words that create fantasy are rarely dramatic. They are usually calm, thoughtful, and slightly mysterious. They describe a feeling rather than a fact. They hint rather than declare. That subtle difference makes all the difference. If this idea resonates with you folks, type this in the comments. I spark imagination. Stay with me because the final insight ties everything together. It reveals the kind of compliment that women remember long after the conversation ends. And once you understand it, you will never look at compliments the same way again. Number 10. The compliment she never forgets. Now we arrive at the final idea, folks. And this one ties everything together, because the compliment a woman never forgets is rarely the most dramatic one. It is the one that makes her feel understood. Let's be straight about something, my friend. People forget praise about their appearance very quickly, not because it is meaningless, but because it is common. If a woman is attractive, she has heard those words many times before. But a compliment that reveals how someone truly experiences her presence can stay in her memory for years. The Stoics believed that human connection is built through recognition. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that every person wants to feel seen for who they are beneath the surface. When you recognize something genuine about a woman's character, awareness, or emotional presence, the compliment moves from surface level to something deeper. And depth is memorable. Think about it this way. Most conversations follow predictable patterns. Small talk, casual jokes, light compliments. Then people move on with their day. But every once in a while someone says something that feels different, something thoughtful, something that reveals careful attention. That is the moment people remember. Let me show you what this looks like in real life. Robert is 65, attending a quiet community fundraiser in Denver. During the evening, he speaks with a woman named Diane, 58. They talk about family travel and the strange way certain life experiences shape how we see the world. Diane shares a story about volunteering at a local shelter and how those experiences changed the way she views everyday problems. Robert listens carefully for a moment before responding. "You seem like someone who brings calm into places that need it." Diane pauses, because that sentence does something rare. It recognizes something about her character, not her clothes, not her appearance, but the emotional impact she has on the world around her. Later that evening, that sentence may still echo quietly in her thoughts. Now imagine another moment. Stephen is 62, attending a small outdoor concert in Austin. While waiting in line for drinks, he begins speaking with a woman named Linda, 54, about music and the memories certain songs carry. Linda mentions that she believes music reveals who people really are. Stephen smiles slightly and says something simple. I get the feeling conversations with you leave people thinking long after they walk away. Again, notice the difference. Stephen did not try to impress her. He simply described the effect she seems to have on others. And that kind of recognition carries emotional weight, because it touches identity. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote that meaningful words should be simple, sincere, and rooted in observation rather than flattery. That principle applies perfectly here. The compliment a woman never forgets usually has three qualities. It is calm, it is thoughtful, and it reflects something real about who she is, not what she looks like, not what she owns, but how she exists in the world. When a man learns to notice those deeper qualities, his words naturally become more powerful, not because he memorized clever lines, but because he pays attention, and attention is rare. In a world where most people are distracted, a man who observes carefully and speaks honestly becomes unforgettable. And that, my friend, is the real secret behind compliments that stay with someone long after the conversation ends. Alright folks, let's quickly bring this all together. In this video we talked about something most men completely misunderstand. Compliments are not powerful because they sound impressive. They are powerful because they make a woman feel truly seen. We explored why praising appearance rarely creates lasting attraction, and why noticing her mind, her presence, and the energy she brings into a room leaves a far deeper impact. When a compliment is calm, sincere, and rooted in real observation, it stays with her. It lingers in her thoughts long after the conversation ends. That is the Stoic way of communication, not loud, not desperate, just clear, grounded, and genuine. If you want to go deeper into these ideas, consider joining the membership of this channel. Inside the membership, we explore the psychology of attraction, Stoic mindset, and the communication skills that help men develop quiet confidence and stronger connections. And if you found value in today's video, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next lesson. Thank you for spending this time with me, my friend. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you in the next video tomorrow.